Welcome back to the Law School Toolbox podcast. Today we are excited to have a special guest with us today, Friday Apaliski, the Sustainability Concierge. Your Law School Toolbox hosts are Allison Monahan and Lee Burgess. That's me. We're here to demystify the law school and early legal career experience so you'll be the best law student and lawyer you can be. We're the co-creators of the Law School Toolbox, the Bar Exam Toolbox, and the career-related website Career Dicta. Allison also runs the Girls Guide to Law School. If you enjoy the show, please leave a review or rating on your favorite listening app. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to us. You can reach us via the contact form on lawschooltoolbox.com, and we'd love to hear from you. And with that, let's get started. Welcome back. Today we have a very special guest. It's a non-lawyer. I know everybody gets really excited when we have non-lawyers come to the podcast, but her name is Friday Apaliski, and she is the Sustainability Concierge, which is such a big title to have.
Thanks.
Yes. So Friday and I met through mutual friends. Actually, didn't we meet at a Stacey Abrams event?
We did.
We did, yeah, here in San Francisco. So at a political event, but it turns out that we run in a similar circle with lots of other people, and then we got really excited talking about reusable items, and then it just went from there.
Yeah, because I could talk about reusable items all day long.
Right. But in this day of age, this conversation around sustainability is something that I think everyone is having with concerns about climate change. And, you know, we just lived through another season of terrible fires. I hope that the season is over when we're recording this in the Bay Area and in Southern California. So it's something that I think a lot of people are thinking about. And I think the student population, the law student and young lawyer population, is kind of ripe to make some lifestyle changes, but it's hard to figure out how to think about it. So that's kind of what we wanted to talk about today.
Yeah, I mean, you can't blame people for not wanting to think about it.
No,
right?
Because who needs more on their to-do list? Not you and I.
I mean, let's be real. Nobody.
Nobody.
But it is definitely a topic that is unavoidable.
Yeah.
It seems to be in every aspect of the news, in every aspect of daily life, if you can, and you know, rightfully so. It affects all of us all the time. And so it is something that we need to take into consideration. And I think, you know, certainly I sympathize with students who have a lot on their plate, who are just trying to keep their head above water. And I think also, you know, being a student is a very traditional thing. It's been done in the same way for a long time.
Yeah.
And so taking the time to figure out how to do it a little differently is challenging, but hopefully we can make it easier.
I know we're going to make it easier and give you some really like concrete things that you can think about doing. So first, before we dive in, when we were getting ready to do this podcast, you and I were talking a bit about this loaded word, sustainability, that's getting thrown. It's kind of like climate change. It's getting thrown around a lot. It's a touchy subject for some people. So how do you like to think about sustainability in a way that can help people, like can invoke positive change?
Sustainability is a word that has historically been used by this movement to describe being in harmony with the earth, right? And with the environment. And if we could just sustain, right? Stay in the same way.
Right.
I think we could all argue now that we actually aren't aiming for sustainability right now.
Right.
Right? Because we're a little bit out of balance.
Right.
And that maybe what we're really aiming for is regeneration and repair. And so when you start going down that rabbit hole, the words can get they change fast.
Right.
They can get frustrating. Right? And that's not my goal. Really what I'm trying to say is sustainability is a practice for you personally. What can you do that puts you in harmony with the environment? And how can you work towards being better and better? Because better is better.
Right.
So you don't have to be perfect.
Right.
In fact, nobody is perfect. And we're going to leave a footprint. That's part of being a human. And that's okay.
Right.
We just want to do the best we can.
Yeah.
Right? And the best you can today or the best you can with this one choice, that's what matters.
Right.
And so if the word sustainability helps inspire you to start down that journey, great. If it's a different word, that's okay too.
Right. Well, before we dive in too deeply into this list, because I'm having a bit of a scattered day, I forgot to have you introduce yourself.
Oh, whoops.
So we'll go ahead and pause here now that we know what sustainability means. And you can tell us a bit more about what does it mean to be a sustainability concierge and how did you get involved in this? And what do you do in your daily life? Besides go to political events with me where we can chit chat about things.
Oh, right. Yeah. Well, that's definitely part of it. So how did I get here? Well, I have an advertising background. I started, right out of school, and I had a nice long career in advertising and got a little burned out. I think probably something that your audience might be familiar with.
Lawyers are never burned out. I don't know what you're talking about.
And so I thought, what am I going to do? And I happened to give a presentation actually at my office about recycling and composting. It was totally on the whim. I just put some rubber gloves on and sorted 10 people's trash cans and was like, look at this, you guys, we made 0 trash. And afterwards everybody goes, oh my gosh, Friday, that was such a fantastic presentation. And I was like, really not that fantastic. I just sorted trash. But I would do this job in a heartbeat if I would leave this job and do that as my job in a heartbeat if I could. And somebody said, well, we have my friend of mine works at the San Francisco Department of the Environment. I was like, what? We have a Department of the Environment? That's amazing. I want to work there. And sure enough, there was an opening. And I thought, what's the worst thing that happens? Is that I get this job and it's crazy and I leave it and do something else.
Right.
It was supposed to only be for a year.
That's always how these stories start.
Yeah, always.
I've moved places for a year.
Yeah, right.
For a decade.
So 6 years later, I basically built the entire marketing department at the Department of the Environment, which in San Francisco is one of the leading policy agencies in the world. And they were the very first people to pass a plastic bag ban. They were the very first people to implement mandatory recycling and composting. And we are really leading the way, certainly as it relates to zero waste, but on the sustainability front as a whole. So, of course, all of these policymakers and scientists were very skeptical of anybody who wanted to come in and talk about marketing or language and advertising, and all of that seemed really scary. So they had me sit with them every single day and go to the facilities and learn it as deeply as I could learn it so that they would trust me to communicate about it accurately. And still in a way that doesn't sound like a scientist or a policymaker.
Right.
And so that's what I did. And it was really fun. And I got a phenomenal education out of it. But at the end of the day, everybody kept texting me, hey, Friday, yeah, I get it about this issue. Can you just tell me, what mattress do you buy? What shampoo do you use? Should I buy this lipstick? Pictures. Does this go in the compost or the recycle? Is this compostable? Is this recyclable?
Right.
And time again, everybody is saying, I definitely want to do the right thing. I just don't know how. Can you tell me how? And it was very easy for me to see that the places we go that we trust, like the government, to be the authority, is very good at telling us what the problem is and very good at saying, you should bring a reusable container.
Right.
But not what reusable container and for when and where do I buy it and how much does it cost?
Yep.
Right? The logistics of actually doing the right thing, there's not really anybody there.
Well, it's true. And I think sometimes you don't even know that there's a better option. So
right, you don't know what you don't know.
I think I was interviewing doulas, no joke, and somebody told me about your Instagram handle. This is before I met you. I don't know if you know this story, that I was internet stalking you before I met you. And then
I'm so flattered.
I know, and we have children of similar age.
We do.
And you posted something about being able to pump breast milk into glass bottles.
Yeah.
And I literally, as someone who has pumped breast milk for now probably like almost 4 years of my life.
Oh my gosh.
I know. But until like I had seen that, it never dawned on me that you could buy these little, they unfortunately are plastic, but you could buy these little adapters and use these glass bottles that I already stored milk in that you could pump into. And then I found out that like a different brand of bottles, you could like screw them directly into the pump things. And it was like, until I saw that post, it didn't even occur to me to like look for that stuff because I didn't know that existed.
Well, right. And also, you're exhausted.
Yeah.
Right? And so your brain isn't working at its max capacity anyway because you're tired and you're busy thinking about a million other things. And so that is really what brought me into the job that I do now, which is to be that person who helps you understand what are the choices you can make.
Right.
And where do you buy these things or not buy them?
Right.
And how do you make this work for you?
Right.
Which is not the same thing as how does everybody make this work?
Right. This is
right?
about
and I think
individual change, not
this is about
institutional change.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And ultimately it leads to that. So inevitably the next question I get is, but does it really matter if just me does this one thing? And it does.
Yeah.
This is where I can say, coming from city government, yes, policy is the way to make large-scale systematic change, but government does not lead on anything.
Right.
And so what happens when you bring your metal straw or you say, no, thank you, I don't want a plastic straw.
Right.
You tell the business, hey, I'm your customer and I'm willing and able to make a change.
Right.
I want to make a change. So enough of us do that then when the policymakers go to that business and say, hey, we're thinking about writing a policy that requires a change. What do you think about that? And they say, well, I've had a bunch of customers who are open to this change. Yeah, okay, I won't fight you on this one.
Right.
Let's do it.
Right.
And that's where you get real change. And meanwhile, maybe when you say, I don't want that plastic straw because I saw it stuck in the nose of a turtle and that really killed me.
Right.
The person next to you hears that and goes, oh, I hadn't thought about that. And so it really, like an ecosystem, is all connected.
Yeah.
And so it is important. So I think, again, like back to this idea that nobody is perfect.
Right.
Better is better. If everybody does their best, we'll be in such a better place.
Yeah.
Right? And so that's really where I'm coming from is how can we help people? How can I empower individual people to do their best?
Yeah.
And use this crazy knowledge library in my brain. Like, there's an answer for that.
Right.
Let's get it out there.
And I think, social media is quite a mixed bag, but I think that's kind of one of the things in this area for me, that social media has been a very passive way to educate myself. Because I think if you start to follow, people like you, or there's I don't remember how I discovered them, but I've bought stuff from a company up in Oregon called Marley's Monsters.
I love them.
Yeah, and that's where all my unpaper towels come from. Don't worry, guys, we're going to talk about those in a second. I know everyone's on the edge of their seats.
They're in Eugene, by the way, and I'm a duck.
Oh,
so I like them even more. Of
course, even more. But I've discovered them through something, and then I follow them, and sometimes they'll be like, oh, did you know you could replace X with Y? And sometimes I'm like, no, I didn't know I could replace X with Y.
Right.
I didn't know that someone was making Y. And so I do like that if you're interested in this kind of stuff, and we're all short for time, that there are kind of some passive ways that you can get these different ideas and these kind of life hacks that I think are really awesome. And you start to see people in your circle, I now have a ton of friends and mom friends, and we now all start reusing jars, which I thought would be not my jam, but our mutual friend who introduced us, my kid was at her house and then came home with a jar of figs and a yogurt jar, leftover yogurt jar. And I mean, a long time ago, it would always have been a Ziploc, right?
Right.
But I think there's something, and then I'm sure that next time her kid comes to my house, I'll fill that yogurt jar with something else and send it right back. And
right.
And those little things, it's those little tiny systematic changes, I think are pretty phenomenal when they really add up over time.
Yeah. And I think that it's about sharing it with each other. That's such an important aspect of this, which is knowing that, taking on this burden all yourself, that you have to do all the research and you have to figure out how to do it all right. It's overwhelming, and it leads a lot of people to do nothing.
Yeah.
Right.
That's true.
And it's certainly if you're a student, you're like, I just don't have time for this right now.
Right.
Or a parent. I mean, like, name your thing. Everyone's busy.
Right.
So if you can just focus on what's the best thing I can do right now, this one choice that I can make. And if that's the only thing I do today, still it's a win.
Yeah.
And then you learn about another thing you can do from someone else.
Right.
And that's so much easier than trying to get on the internet and look it all up and figure out the best. And there's just so much conflicting information and, you know, a gazillion bloggers who all have different ideas about what the right answer is. And you just get into this vortex that can be just really tough.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting too is if you're thinking about like being a student and setting up a new space, you know, typically whenever you relocate, you have to buy a bunch of junk anyway. It's very hard to set up, especially if you've relocated like across the country, you've typically given away everything, you know, and so then you have this kind of like situation where you need to invest and make choices. And I think for me, when I think about that time of like setting up my home, you know, I had to buy containers that food went in, you know, like, and you had to buy glasses and you had to buy, you know, things. And I know in my house, I think ball jars can be used for absolutely everything because my kids can't break them. I'm sure they could, but I've never seen one break, and they've got handy dandy sizes, and I put everything in them. Like,
I mean, put everything
literally,
in them.
I drink out of them. I make cold brew coffee out of them. I
have
snacks.
1 pint jar that holds my avocado. Every
day. And, you know, I think when you start to have these things around your house, things become really easy to utilize. We were also both poll workers at the election, which this is post-election that you guys were listening to this, but I noticed because we had to pack in food for like the whole day, which I typically don't live that way anymore because I work from home. But lucky for me, I have a whole cabinet of sustainable food containers because I send my kid to school with his lunches. And so I totally pulled out like his little insulated lunch thing and opened up his Planet box that had all the little sections in it. And I just like packed in all my food. And then it was really easy because it was all there. And I think what was interesting to me is I started to see that you can create these new habits when you start being thoughtful about having some of these things, and then you just start pulling them out.
Totally.
And you really can start to see, it's not that I'm never going to use a plastic bag again, it happens, but you can see a great reduction in the amount of times, or you go for that plastic bag and you're like, actually, I could use the ball jar.
Totally.
And, you know.
So similarly.
Yeah.
At my polling place, one of the ladies went and bought a salad and came back and went, "Oh, I forgot a fork. I'm going to have to go get a plastic one." And I was like, no. I actually have a fork in my backpack.
Yeah.
So I think students and moms are similar in that we carry a lot of stuff.
That's true. We definitely do.
And so I have a backpack. Mm-hmm. In my backpack, I keep like a handful of things all the time. There is always in my backpack a cloth napkin. Mm-hmm. Always. I use it for all kinds of stuff. Mm-hmm. There's always in my backpack a fork, a spoon, a straw, and chopsticks. Mm-hmm. These are not fancy ones that I like went and bought from some thing or whatever. And if you don't have a fork and a spoon and a straw and chopsticks, that's fine. Go buy one of these fancy kits that everybody is selling, eco, whatever.
Right.
I literally just grab them from my kitchen.
Right, from your forks. And
when they get dirty, I put them in the dishwasher and grab another fork.
Right.
Like this idea that you have to buy something new for everything. Mm-hmm. Now, what I did buy for myself was this like really beautiful handmade cloth holder.
Oh, yeah.
For these things, and it makes me feel special every time I use it.
Yeah.
It also means I'm not going to lose it because I love this thing and it's beautiful. And I think there's something to that as well. Mm-hmm. If you are using things you don't care about, you will lose them and you will break them.
That's true.
If you buy one thing that maybe costs a little extra money, so you don't want to replace it all the time, and you love it, and it is beautiful to you. It doesn't necessarily have to be actually beautiful, but if you love it, you won't lose it.
Yeah.
I tell this to people all the time. So I said my napkin, I said my utensils, always I have my cup. Always. And as it turns out, I just have to say this out loud.
Yes.
My commuter cup that I use for tea.
Yes.
It also works for cold drinks.
It's magic.
It also works for water.
Yeah.
I've actually put soft serve ice cream in it.
Oh.
I've put leftovers in it. Sometimes when a banana peel is empty, when I have a banana peel and there's no compost around, I can stick my compost in it. Like, it's kind of an amazing vessel, actually.
Yeah, that's true.
And I just feel the need to say that out loud.
That you don't need to have multiple
You don't
things.
need multiple things.
Yep.
And so those things, I mean, they are in my bag all the time. And then I've started also bringing like a cloth baggie.
Oh, yeah.
For a half-eaten sandwich or a cookie or a whatever.
Right.
And you could end up with a backpack full of stuff if you wanted a thing for every possible scenario. But those things alone get me through just about everything I need.
Yeah.
And again, like, it's in vogue to have a big purse or a backpack.
Right.
And most of the time when I see people on the bus, those purses and backpacks are near empty.
Yeah.
So, like, I know there's room in there for a cup.
Totally.
You totally can do that one.
And, sometimes when you're trying to save money, if you bring your own cup, you get a discount.
Yeah.
Or
like at Phil's, it's
Yeah.
not just a little discount.
Yeah.
I mean, I imagine you lawyers like Phil's coffee because it, like, really gets you
got a
going.
jolt.
It's got a jolt. They will charge you, if you bring in a large cup, they will charge you for a small,
That's
matter.
amazing. That's a huge change.
It's like $1 off.
Yeah.
It's huge.
Yeah. And so I think it's these things about like starting to use reusable things, starting to use reusable to-go containers. If you do bring your food to school, which I think can be a really great way to save money and also to be a bit healthier, so you don't eat pizza all the time. Law schools are notorious for having pizza at like every event. You end up eating pizza for a lot of pizza, like a lot of pizza. I can't even begin to describe how much pizza you eat in law school. I was not gluten-free yet when I went to law school. I had a lot of pizza, but you can do these things. And then if you're thoughtful about what you collect, I think a lot of these things have multiple uses. And I think if you bring your own stuff, there's that extra little I have to wash it. But in the end, it's also nicer to have nicer things, which I think, I do when I've got like my nice, clean canteen water bottle or whatever that I take places. It's nice. It's not going to break. I had it at the polling place and then we were at a firehouse and I just kept going to refill it, and I would have probably drank like 10 bottles of water that day if I hadn't brought my own thing and just kept going to refill it at the, in the kitchen in the firehouse.
Right.
So it could be these little things.
Speaking of bottled water.
Yes.
So there's this very interesting thing about I really like to talk about how sustainability is all the things, right? And it's very easy to start down the road of zero waste.
Right.
Again, a very aspirational term.
Right.
But waste isn't all of it. So, yes, plastic water bottles are terrible, right? They're made out of oil and plastic lasts forever and it never gets digested by the earth. And there's a million reasons why plastic is terrible.
Right.
Oh, by the way, the water in those bottles, not at all regulated, not tested, could be from anywhere. So I really like that the tap water is at least tested, multiple times a day.
It's true.
It is also free, so that's helpful. But there is a kind of toxic aspect to this as well when you think about reuse and when you start digging into plastic packaging and food packaging and what's in that, the PFAS chemicals that are on the inside lining of the chip bag so that the chips don't stick to the bag.
Right.
That's not great for your health.
Right.
It is actively bad for your health.
Right.
Right. I mean, and when you start thinking about your organic whatever item, but that it's wrapped in hot plastic,
exactly.
Not so helpful, right? And so one of the things that drives me bananas, especially on social media, is you'll find people who are really focused on one aspect of something, really focused on having only one mason jar full of trash, or really focused on having nothing toxic in their, in their environment, or whatever it is, or being super energy efficient. But the truth is, if we could all kind of dip our toes in all aspects of that, it would be better.
Yeah, I think
for our personal health and also for the health of the planet. And again, if we don't take an absolutist view,
right,
but we do all of the things a little bit better, we're in much better shape.
Yeah, I think that's true. I also have noticed around my own home that just like these incremental changes, they start to multiply on each other. And so 100%. Also, I feel like Marley's Monsters should totally just promote this podcast. I'll send it to them because I'm going to talk about how many of their products I'm really obsessed with. So one of them is their unpaper towels.
I love the unpaper
which
towels.
I actually do not do on the roll because that was too much of a commitment for me. But I do fold them.
Really? I do them on the roll.
Well, I'm sure you do. That doesn't surprise me.
But mostly because of people who come and visit my house.
Oh, yeah.
They don't, like my husband and my son and even my mom who started this a zillion years ago, right?
Yeah.
They think to grab a towel.
Yeah.
And there's a drawer of napkins that everybody knows you can use for whatever you want. But if you have someone coming into your house from outside, they look around the kitchen aimlessly like, how could there possibly be no paper towels here?
That's true.
So having this thing that looks like paper towels
is
actually a really nice cue.
That's really true. So I keep mine folded in half in a fruit bowl.
Perfect.
Basically by my sink. And and I use them for everything. I use them to they clean the cutting board. They clean up the mess on the floor. I mean, we have small children and I won't even begin to tell you what happens in my kitchen. But everything I have a laundry basket in my kitchen that all of our kitchen towels and stuff go in, and they're just more in there. They go in my kids' lunch. They're in my bag. I take them with me. I took them with me to my polling place.
Right.
And they just go directly back in there. And then I read on their social media that if you take out the threads, you can compost them when they get totally tattered, I believe.
Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah. I did not know that.
Because I think they're just felt.
You also can recycle them.
Yeah.
There's a lot of textile recycling.
That's true.
Which is great. Mm-hmm. And you should never, ever throw any cloth, anything into the landfill.
Yeah.
Really never. And as much as it pains me, and believe me, this is a painful thing for me to say out loud, but there is an H&M in every single city, in every single place.
Right.
If you can put your blinders on and just walk in there with your tattered your
Marley's Monsters rags,
right? Your Marley's Monsters rags, or your sock with a hole in it, or your ripped sheet, or your shirt that doesn't fit anymore, or whatever it is that you no longer want. They have a great recycling program.
That's really cool. I didn't know
There
that.
is another company that does it for them on the back end that is legit and good.
That's great.
There are also other great companies that do that. Levi's, the North Face. That you will find that there is, if you start looking for it, textile recycling everywhere. So there really is no reason to throw anything cloth in the garbage.
Yeah.
But yes, if you get something that is 100% cotton, you can compost it.
Yeah, which is also awesome. We're big composters here in San Francisco, if you're not from the Bay Area. It helps that we have municipal compost. I'm not composting it in my backyard.
Right. So. The other thing I will say about using cloths is that it really matters that you have your system set up right.
Oh, fair point.
Okay, so you said it, and I do this all the time, but if you don't have a place to put those dirty cloths,
true.
It becomes, it doesn't work. And so what I wish Marley's Monsters would do is only sell cloths with a laundry basket.
Oh, that'd be true.
Right? Like they should sell them as a pair, because if you have one without the other, you're going to get frustrated.
Right, because they do that with the facial rounds, which I also have from them, because they have a little knit basket that I keep in my bathroom, and then I stuff all the used little facial rounds in, and then I dump them into my laundry hamper, which is also in my bathroom, and then they get washed.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's not like you're not doing laundry. Everybody is doing laundry all the time. So doing more laundry is not a big deal.
Right.
Inevitably, the question comes up, well, what about the water?
Right.
And here we are in California, a very drought-prone state,
right.
And it is not a joke that we don't want to waste water.
Right.
That said, the environmental footprint of a disposable item, the amount of water and fuel and everything else to get it to make it, right? To mine it, to make it, to ship it, and then for you to use it for 5 seconds and then throw it in the throw it away, even if you're throwing it in the compost.
Because there's a footprint for compost, for like the garbage to pick it up.
It has to be picked up. And so never, never, never is a disposable item going to win the environmental award over a reusable item.
Yeah.
Never.
Yeah. Okay. That's a very good point.
And so I just feel the need to say that, because every once in a while you get these news reports that make it confusing for people. The most recent one, which just made me pull my hair out, was this idea that your plastic bag has a lower carbon footprint than your canvas reusable bag.
Oh, I think I did see that.
Did you see
I don't think
that?
I read it, but I saw it.
Okay, so yes, that is true, because it weighs less. It doesn't take as much to make it or ship it.
Right.
This study did literally nothing about the end of the life of this bag.
Right.
So, well, let's talk about what are the costs for when it becomes litter and blight. What are the costs for when it clogs up the sewer system? What are the costs for when a bird eats it and dies? And then, by the way, what happens when it turns into little tiny pieces of fish food, and then the fish eat it, and then you eat the fish?
Right.
Like, nobody's talking about that part of it.
Right.
So the other thing I will say is, like, basically plastic is never the answer.
Right.
Because it is a unnatural product that is made out of dinosaur bones and will never, ever, ever, ever be digested by the earth. So I don't want you to go out and buy 1 million canvas bags.
Right.
But I wouldn't mind you having 5 that you use and use and use and use and use and use and use forever. And that would be the most sustainable thing.
Yeah, that's a really good point. All right, so to wrap up kind of what some of our favorite things that are low-cost things.
We have so many
favorite things. Well, we'll just do a quick list, because I think if you're setting up a new house, or let's say you're making a list for holiday shopping or birthday shopping, like you can also ask other people to contribute to help you do this.
Totally.
So we've already discussed our love affair with ball jars, which are amazing. And everything at Marley's Monsters, but specifically some sort of cloth, like you were mentioning, cloth napkins or something like these felt on paper towels, but using fabric instead of using things like paper towels. Yep. And cloth napkins. And paper napkins.
Yep. Also, we're talking about school supplies. We're talking to students.
Right.
Wisdom Supply Co.
Oh, yes. You sent me this link. It's pretty cool.
It's amazing. They do all school supplies and office supplies plastic free.
That's amazing.
It is. And they are high quality things that you don't need to buy a ton of. And I know the women who run it, and they are real rad.
That's awesome.
And super committed to truly no plastic. So put that on your holiday wish list for sure. There's some great things there. Truly, my favorite is the highlighter pencil.
Oh, yes. You were telling me about this. I have not played with it myself.
I love it because, when I was a student, it would just drive me bananas that the highlighter pens, when you get them, would like ink through the paper.
And then they run out, because a lot of students go through a lot of highlighters.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And then they run out, and you're like halfway. And none of those annoyances happen with the highlighter pencil.
Yeah.
And it lasts for a really, 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 really long time.
Yeah.
And it's, costs like nothing when you compare it to the price of a gajillion plastic ones. Side note, that whole thing about Crayola recycling their markers.
Yeah.
Bogus.
Oh, it's too bad.
Yeah. They incinerate them. That's not recycling. It's actually really terrible. Another side story. Just in case you were feeling better about sending your highlighters back.
Okay.
No way.
Okay,
what else do I love? I have a Tiffin that's like a 3-stack.
Oh, yeah.
With a handle on the top. And I love it. And people comment on it all the time. It's like the best little lunch container. And you can get them, like a pretty modern looking version of them at Food 52.
Oh, nice. They have some really cool looking stuff there.
They do have some cool stuff.
Yeah.
They're not... Okay, so Food 52, the Tiffin, I'm totally in love with it. If you have not been to My Life Without Plastic...
Oh, yes, I do love them too.
It's a great store.
That was kind of my gateway drug before I met Marley's Monsters.
Yep. My all-time favorite item, the thing that I am like personally known for and is attached to my hand more than my cell phone, is my glass reusable commuter mug. And they sell it.
Nice.
It's $20 and it's beautiful, and it is, you will get compliments wherever you go on it.
And many coffee places, it will pay for itself in
very quickly.
a couple of weeks.
So definitely add that to your holiday list. Nice. What are my other favorite things? I mean, if you haven't been to the Wild Minimalist, that's a great website to go to. They also carry Marley's Monsters.
Oh, nice.
You know, and then the other thing I would say, and really, there's a reason why all these R's start with reduce. Reduce and reuse, and then recycle, and then rot. Rot is compost. But slow down and see if you can use less things. Like, we just listed off all of our favorite places to go shopping, but believe me, you don't have to buy a bunch of stuff to be helpful to the planet. In fact, the less stuff you buy, the better, right? And one of the mantras that I have, especially around the holiday, is perishable, not cherishable. Perishables, not cherishables. Can you buy somebody an experience? Can you buy them flowers? Can you buy them food? I mean, students love food.
That's true. Do you know what I am making for my holiday gifts? Spoiler alert to anybody who's on my holiday group, is I'm doing preserved lemons.
I love it.
Well, you can get some when they're done. We have a lemon tree, and I'm going to use my handy dandy ball jars that people can reuse, but we're making preserved lemons and then candied lemons, which I'm also going to do in a secondary thing. But I was trying to come up with a project to do, because I like to incorporate my kids, but I was also just like, what do we have?
What do we have?
And then what can I not dump on somebody that they're like, great, now what do I do? If they don't want the lemons, you can dump them in the compost. That's fine. Keep the ball jar. Like, it's just...
Put them in some whiskey, you'll be fine.
Yeah, but it's kind of like, I think there is something to just like not giving people more stuff. And
totally. And especially when you are living in a small space and you don't want to have more stuff.
Yeah.
The other thing is slowing down.
Yeah.
And trying to find the things that you actually need elsewhere.
True.
So convenience is what kills the earth.
Yeah.
Truly. When you are rushing around to set up your apartment or moving or whatever, you go, oh my gosh, I have to have this thing right now. Amazon overnight.
Right.
Or I'm running to Target and it doesn't matter that everything in there is plastic. That's when those things happen, right? If you can take a deep breath and say, well, I'm really looking for a lamp. I want a white lamp. Craigslist, right? Craigslist is a great place, especially if you're a student, right? Think about it. All the stuff that you got rid of, someone else is getting rid of.
Oh, for sure.
Right? So there's a great exchange of stuff that's happening. You know, Craigslist is the my generation of version of it. The new version is Facebook Marketplace or Buy Nothing,
right?
Or, whatever. There's a jillion of them.
Right.
So I would say that's a great option. There are consignment stores.
When we talked about this we did a fashion discussion where we were talking about using places like ThredUp and consignment stores to buy clothes for interviews.
Yeah.
And to be able to kind of invest in maybe more expensive pieces of clothing that you could then you can typically afford.
Yeah.
For young law students who really only need like one or two of these interview suits. And I never really thought about that also as being an avenue for solving fashion problems.
Oh,
because
huge.
When you could get, maybe a suit at H&M that's not going to last very long or not going to be as nice of a fabric, or it may wrinkle more if it's, stuffed in your suitcase and has to go on an airplane,
right. And makes your heart feel bad when you find out who made it.
Yeah.
There's
that too. So I think that is also something that a lot of people are just starting to really do more, is look at consignment as a way to kind of fill that void as well. Totally.
And hand-me-downs, right? And who has something and what can I borrow? And what can I reuse? And, but when you speed up and you say, I need to have it right now, that's when you don't have the time to look around and find what you really need or what you really want.
Yeah.
And so my biggest thing on, how to be sustainable is to slow down, right? Look at what's in your local stores. If you want to have local stores, you got to buy from local stores.
It's true.
And that means you got to know what's in them.
Yep.
Right? So walk around, see what is around, and when you need something, go to the store down the street.
Right.
That helps your local economy, and it builds community, and it, getting everything delivered to your door is just not a great thing for the earth. And don't get me wrong, sometimes you need to do that.
It's true.
I am not shaming anybody who has the emergency where you just have to go on Amazon and get something.
Right.
That happens.
Right.
It's okay. Thank goodness we have a resource
right.
for when those things happen. But if most of the time you can avoid it, great.
Yeah. So the other things that we've kind of brainstormed, and we talk about this like at our own virtual office space, is trying to go as paperless as we can. And so one of the things we talk about on this podcast a lot is that the importance of handwriting, because handwriting does make touch points with the brain that typing does not. But Allison and I recently invested in iPad Pros, which have much better electronic pencils. And if I was sitting in a class, now I could take notes on the iPad Pro and then save them in that different way and not have to, and I'd still get the benefit of the paper notes without necessarily having the paper. And so, there are now electronic casebooks, Casebook Connect through, Wolters Kerner is one of the options, and you can actually have your whole casebook electronically, and you can kind of highlight on that. And so if you're interested in like reducing your paper footprint and even what you have to invest, I think there are a lot of new options. I think my only caveat is that if you use some of this technology to do activities that typically were done offline, figure out how to make it an offline environment. So if you're going to do your reading on your computer or on your iPad,
right.
turn off the internet. It's like turn off the notifications, because I think that's where this becomes kind of problematic. It's like the computer is also like the void you go in for distraction. And when you want to scan Instagram for the hottest next sustainability suggestion, that's great, but not when you're supposed to be doing your practice exams for your final exams.
Right.
Yeah.
And if you do need to use paper, make sure that it is 100% post-consumer recycled content paper.
Mm-hmm.
That's a lot of words.
And print both sides.
Print both sides. Recycle it when you're done.
Yeah.
And like don't pour your soda on top of it after you put it in the recycle bin, right? Like,
right.
Clean paper is what is recyclable. Dirty paper is not. So yeah, I mean, there are things that you can do. Again, if you're a student, paper is inevitable.
Right.
So just buy the best paper you can. Look for FSC certification. Make sure it's recycled content. The post-consumer part of that is what matters.
Okay.
The deal is that, like in fashion and everything, there is waste that is part of the manufacturing process. So recycled paper is just virgin paper where they chopped the sides off and that stuff would have gotten thrown away anyway, and they make new paper out of it.
Okay.
Post-consumer recycled paper is the paper that you wrote your notes on and you put it in the blue bin and then it got turned into more paper.
Got it.
So there's a difference there. But make sure it's 100%. There's no reason that it shouldn't be. It's available everywhere.
Yeah.
And print both sides. And use less.
Yeah, and just be a little more thoughtful. You know, I think that's really what we can all take on is it doesn't take much more money. It doesn't take even just being a little more thoughtful. It doesn't take much more time. And I think some of this stuff, kind of going back to other ways of doing stuff, can be kind of a fun side hobby. We were just talking about how I made butter this morning, no joke. And like, I learned some things about it, but like, it's almost so interesting, I think, in a consumer world where we don't, like, I actually don't think about how the butter is made. And it was kind of, now granted, I had to like buy the things that went into the butter. And, I don't know that my butter is particularly sustainable, although it is delicious. I will give you that. But
I'll give you another example.
Okay.
Yesterday, my mom went with some of her girlfriends and did a little class with just amongst themselves on how to can.
Oh, nice.
And so they made cranberry sauce for Thanksgiving.
Ooh.
And they did a little lesson and they canned it.
Nice.
I have been making my own jam for all of the years of my life. It was a thing my mom and I would go and pick the fruit every year and make jam. And now I am super spoiled and I don't want to eat jam from a store because it tastes like bleh.
Right.
But it's super easy. And it's one of those things where it actually saves me a bunch of money. It saves me a bunch of time. It's one day where I like use my hands and make a thing and feel super proud about it.
Yeah.
And and do I do it for all of the food that I eat? No.
Right.
But I definitely do it for a bunch of stuff.
Yeah.
And I, again, like, this is an example of do the best you can.
Right.
And I don't imagine that you're making all of the butter that you eat.
No, we eat a lot of butter in my house, and so no, this is only my first butter experience. but it is interesting to think about, and it is like, what could that butter maybe replace? And then I know also we've talked about like a little bit, tiny bit about the toxic load of stuff. It's like I wasn't thinking about it until today when I was mixing the salt. Because I like salted butter, but I was mixing the salts in the butter, and I was like, wow, I know I'm using like Himalaya salt or whatever is the specific salt that I've decided to put in it. And then I sprinkled some sea salt on the top, which is also very good. But it's like, I was like, I don't know what kind of salt is in my butter.
Right.
And I consume a lot of butter. And so it was kind of an interesting idea of like, I'd never really thought about the quality of the salt that's in a lot of the other butter that I'm consuming. And at least now I know what in the one stick of butter, hopefully not my last stick of butter, but in this one stick of cultured butter that I know what's in it. And I just think that is kind of also interesting, like your jam. You like know what's in it.
Yep.
All right. Well, we're running out of time. But the last thing I wanted to touch on is one of the things that you've written about and that you talk about is emergency preparedness. Because I know you lived through the 89 quake here in the Bay Area, and that you put together earthquake kits. We've recently had a lot of people who've had to evacuate for fires. In this area, there are hurricanes happening everywhere. And so, I think for transient folks who I think a lot of students feel transient.
Yep.
Like, I think that an emergency kit is not on everyone's list of things to do, although everybody's getting a solar powered cell phone charger in their holiday gifts from me this year.
Yeah, right.
After all the power outages in California. Yeah.
Solar powered cell phone charger is like number one on the list.
Number one on the list.
Well, that's not true. I think water, technically, like I would do myself a disservice.
Water.
I didn't say water. Water is the number one.
Step one.
But like power is the real
water
close
and
second.
power. Yeah. And so, a lot of people don't have a lot of space and they don't want to spend a lot of money. So like, what are a couple of things that you think people need to just always have on hand besides our solar chargers and some water to get them through kind of a tough time that may or may not be coming?
So quickly about why sustainability and earthquakes or disasters have anything, right? They're related.
Okay.
Right? So being resilient is part of being sustainable.
Oh, true.
Right? And if your house is filled with toxic products, if there is a disaster, no matter what the disaster is, it is going to be 10-fold worse, maybe 100-fold worse for you to clean it up.
True.
After the fact. So this is how these things are connected, right? We don't want you to have these toxic products to begin with. Then when they flood or burn or break, we don't want you to be dealing with that aftermath of that either.
Right.
So here's what you need. Here's what I don't want you to do.
Okay.
Here's what I don't want you to do. I don't want you to go onto Amazon or even Google and look for an emergency backpack.
Yeah, I've flipped through those.
Yeah. So here's why. There's two varieties. One, the first variety that almost everybody can afford is just really crap. It's terrible. Like the products are terrible. The food that they put in there, it's literally flour.
Ew.
I tasted it, and I would rather die than ever eat it again. I'm 100% serious. So the cheap ones are cheap and terrible. The other ones are designed for people who are like in the outback, right? They're survival kits for people who are truly off the grid.
Right.
I don't imagine that's any of your students.
Probably not. If you're in a law school, you're probably near the grid.
Yeah, you're near the grid.
You're near the grid.
So for $150, you can put together a backpack that is totally complete. You need some water. You can use water from bottled water from the store would be fine. Or you can there's like a aqua box that lasts for like 5 years. They come in like square juice box sized. So you need some water. You need some food. I vote for granola bars. But pick
my earthquake kit.
Pick your favorite
I have almonds
bar.
and bars.
Yep. I do not like canned food. A, because I don't know anybody who likes to eat anything that's canned food. And B, they leak and rust. So like that's just not a thing anybody wants to think about. Okay, so you also you're also going to need like a minor first aid kit. I always put in excrement bags because, you know, as a lady,
things happen.
The tree is not my friend in that way. I also always put in a headlamp and a flashlight. You need a radio, like a hand crank radio. You need an extra pair of shoes. So those old sneakers that you were going to throw away, that you were going to take to H&M and recycle.
That's right. Perfect.
Put those in your emergency backpack or in your car or in a bag under your bed.
Right.
All of those places, actually. Put them in all of those places. Let's see. What am I forgetting?
One of the things Allison is...
and then the solar power.
The solar power. Yeah. And Allison lived through a couple of earthquakes in Mexico City. And one of the things she has in her earthquake kit that I also now include, although they have become somewhat controversial because people do not wear them correctly, are the N95 masks.
Oh, yeah.
Because one of the things that she did not realize when she was in an earthquake in Mexico City was how the air is very, very toxic and dirty. And you just walking around, it can be very, very hard. And if your power is out, you cannot run all the air purifiers that we all own now here in California. So, you know, that's another thing to consider.
I always put those in there too. That was a good reminder. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And I should say that in the like mini first aid kit that I usually work with, there's a whistle. There's scissors. And like a multi-tool.
Yeah.
It's just like a little flat
Swiss Army knife.
Yeah, it's like a little bit like a Swiss Army knife or something along those lines.
Yeah.
Essentially, you just want to be able to either grab this bag and go someplace and be kind of okay for a day or two.
Right.
Or have this bag in your car when you're stuck someplace.
Right.
So also you might consider like a couple pairs of underwear. A toothbrush, maybe some floss, depending on how dental hygiene.
I don't know. I was at the dentist yesterday, so I'm thinking a lot about my dental hygiene today.
There we go. And then the other thing I will say is oftentimes lawyers are in big fancy buildings, not always, but on occasion, or near them. And so if you are working in an office or interning in an office that is near a downtown or in a really tall building, I would like you to keep 3 things at your desk: sneakers, leather gloves, and a hard hat. Because if there is an earthquake, you are going to eventually walk outside and maybe walk a long way to wherever you're going. So you need some comfy shoes.
Right.
There's going to be glass all over the ground, and you're going to slip. And the first thing you put down when you slip is your hand. So you don't want your hand to get cut. And the last thing is, everybody puts their desk up against the window because that's the pretty way to be.
Right.
And now the stapler on the 7th floor is a projectile. Oof. So I would like you to have a hard hat on your head. And so those, and they're like really not expensive.
No.
Right? You can get, I was at Home Depot today. You can get a pair of leather gloves for $1.50 at Home Depot. You can get a hard hat for like $15 or $20. And everybody has an old pair of sneakers.
Yeah. Well, that can be your next office warming gift. That's amazing tips. That's really good. I had not thought about that. Well, unfortunately, we are out of time. But if you'd like to learn more about Friday and her work, Friday, how can they find you?
You can find me on Instagram at Sustainability Concierge. You can also look at my website at sustainabilityconcierge.com. And you can email me.
All right. Well, thanks so much for stopping by on the podcast. This was really interesting. And we will link to you and your work and some of the stuff that we've talked about in this podcast. And I hope everybody's able to make maybe one different choice today about being a bit more sustainable.
I would love that. Yeah. You know what I would really love?
What?
If everybody who's listening to this podcast writes a comment about the one sustainable thing they're going to do
Ooh,
because
I love it.
They felt motivated after listening.
All right, let's do it. Comments about what you're motivated to do. All right, if you enjoyed this episode of the Law School Toolbox podcast, please take a second to leave a review and rating on your favorite listening app. We'd really appreciate it. And be sure to subscribe so you don't miss anything. If you have any questions or comments, please don't hesitate to reach out to Lee and Allison at lee@lawschooltoolbox.com or allison@lawschooltoolbox.com, or you can always find us via our website contact form at lawschooltoolbox.com. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk soon.